A few nights ago, I heard Sister Diane say something that prompted me to do what I will do this morning. She said that with all the studies we have done on the book of Revelation, with all the studies she has done, she still doesn't understand Revelation. And to be honest, it bothers me a little bit because it says that we have not been I have not been clear enough in some of the things I've tried to express. Now I know Revelation is a difficult book. I understand, and I have been studying Revelation for the entirety of my 50 years as a Christian. So, and I still don't understand a lot of it, but I have an idea of the overall shape of the book, the purpose of the book, the reason for the book, and overall the message of the book. And I think that's the best we can do at the moment, because what we are waiting on is for God to give us understanding of those places that are not yet clear. But I was thinking of this, and I'm thinking that there's a reason why it's difficult for some people to understand. Usually, what happens is the way we approach something. You approach something from this angle, and some understand and some don't. Then you go the other angle, and some more understand and some others don't. And so sometimes it's just that the way we approach it is not meeting the needs of some people. So I'm going to try to take it from all angles again and again and again until hopefully one day everybody can understand. All right? At least understand as much as I understand, given that there are some things that we just don't understand yet and may not understand until God gives some kind of special revelation. But this morning I want to do an overview of Revelation, an overview. I'm not going to go into details. What I want us to do, what I want to try to do, is to help us to understand the shape of the book. It's interesting to me that I have been since over the years I've become enlightened to something about the way men think and the way women think. Maybe that has something to do with it as well. But my wife, she will say, brother so-and-so just passed. I said, what kind of car was it? She says, I don't know, but I saw the license plate. Now, I have no idea about license plates. I just don't see those. I see the type of vehicle, and that gives me an idea. My wife sees the world differently. She looks for license plates. Another thing that stands out for me, she will say, that looks like Sister so-and-so. I said, that looks nothing like her. She says, yes, look at her face, the face. I'm going to tell you this, and it's not, it's maybe you don't think badly of men, but I'll tell you this. I will know a woman or a man by the shape of the person. I don't see the face. I see the shape long before I see the person. So when I look at a woman in the distance, I know by the shape that it's this person. My wife, I don't know if all women are like this. She knows by the hairstyle or the person's face. But that's the from a distance, that's the last way I try to recognize somebody. So, why am I saying this? I'm saying that even with the study of something like the book of Revelation, the way we see it sometimes depends on the way our minds perceive things. Because some people see the details, and you look at details and you're not getting the big picture. It's hard to understand because you don't see how this thing is related to that thing. You get little snapshots, but what does the whole thing mean? How does the picture come together? That is a bit of a challenge, and for me, I've always found it better if I can understand the big picture, the overall shape. Then I know where to fit the pieces. So that is usually my approach to everything. And it has been helpful to me, I think, in the way I study the Bible. So with Revelation this morning, I'm not going to so much go to the book of Revelation as I'm going to speak of the general principles and the general ideas that are involved in how we deal with the book of Revelation. And I hope that it will be helpful for those of us who are challenged to get an understanding of the overall shape and the meaning of the book. Now, because of the nature of what we are doing this morning, I'm going to say, I don't like to do this, but if there is something that is not clear and you'd like me to explain or to say it a different way, you can stop me. Please don't stop me to make comments, long comments or anything, just if something needs clarification. All right? So, because remember my time is short. So I'm going to try to skip through my slides, my PowerPoint slides, and go through this so I can get through before 10:30. Before what is it? 11:30. All right, so let me go ahead and share.
Brother David, if you're not going to use your slides on some, make sure you're clear on the chapters and verses, okay?
Yes, I may not even need those, Sister Elizabeth, but I will have on the screen what I'm going to need for us to have this overview. Like I
Okay.
say, I'm not going to be very detailed. Um, and for somebody asking, no, I'm not starting at Revelation chapter 1. I'm trying to give an overview of what I consider to be the most important or the most significant part of the book of Revelation. And maybe even saying this, I'm a bit presumptuous because who knows what is the most important part. But I'm looking at from chapter 4 to chapter 19 because I believe this is where we are today and this is the part of the book that affects us. So that's why I'm looking at those chapters. And I will explain a little better as we go on. So the first thing I wanted to look at is what are the issues? What are the issues that are being dealt with in what I call a cosmic conflict? Some of you will refer to it as the great controversy. But I believe that understanding these issues is most important because Revelation is dealing with these issues. And if we can understand the issues, we have a head start on understanding what is going on in the book of Revelation. So the question that every Christian, as a matter of fact, everybody on this planet should be looking at, what are the issues in this great cosmic conflict? What is going on? You hear about America attacking Venezuela this morning. You hear about Russia in an ongoing war with Ukraine. And you ask the question, what's the point behind all of these things? Where does all this come from and where does it go? Ultimately, in everything, something is going on in the background that affects everybody on planet Earth and even everybody in the universe. We refer to it as a cosmic conflict because it takes in the entire cosmos, the entire universe. There's a battle that is taking place. And what we want to understand, if we are to find our proper place in life, we need to understand what are the issues that are involved. What is going on? What are the issues? Because if we understand the issues, we can know which side are we on. All right. So when we talk about this cosmic conflict, we're talking about the battle between Satan and God. There are some people who don't even believe that there's a Satan. And some don't believe that there's a God. And so these people from the beginning are in limbo. They are going nowhere. For them to live is just to exist and then to die. Like a dumb animal, like a cow, a dog, or even a cockroach. Their lives have no real purpose. When we understand that there is a God and there's a great enemy called the devil, then we can understand now that we fall on one side or the other. Now, God, on the side of God, there the force, should I use the word force? There is a kingdom. Let me use the word kingdom. There is a kingdom that God is using to represent himself. And in this world, this kingdom is made up of people. And the great hallmark of this kingdom and of these people is that they are centered on the Son of God. They are centered on the work that is being done by let me say, God's champion. God is a champion, and this champion is the Son of God, who is, of course, his Son, Jesus Christ. So, one second. So, we are actually, it's the kingdom of God, but I'm actually going to refer to it as the kingdom of Christ. Because Jesus is the one who is fighting the battles of God. So, God's agency in the world is the kingdom of Christ. That's how God is involved in what is happening in the world. Or, let me put it another way. Planet Earth is involved in this great conflict, this cosmic conflict. And in this world, God's expression of his way is his kingdom, which is made up of Christians who are centered around Christ. All right. On the other side, in this world, there is also the kingdom of Satan. And even though everybody in this world falls into one kingdom or the other, Satan's kingdom is primarily the kingdom of the beast. All right, when you put the prophecies of Revelation and Daniel together, you see that Satan's kingdom, Satan's chief agent, is always represented as a beast. And in Revelation, everything comes together. That entire kingdom is symbolized by this great beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So, you have the two kingdoms in the world, and you have these two kingdoms are the representatives of the two great antagonists. On the one hand, there's the Lord God Almighty. And on the other hand, there is the rebel, Lucifer, Satan, the devil, who stood up against God. So, these two kingdoms are in conflict. And I would like to highlight the elements of this conflict. Now, to understand these elements, we begin to get an understanding of what is going on and why we are here. So, first of all, the contestants. In this conflict, the contestants are, on the one hand, there is Satan. He is the one who is the general of his cause, and of course, on the other side, there's God's champion, and everybody knows that this champion is Jesus Christ. The way this thing is set up, and let's try to understand this, the way this thing is set up, you would think that it is a conflict, it's a battle between God and Satan, and you're partly right. Satan is fighting God, but it's not just a battle of strength, otherwise God would deal with it himself. God doesn't need anybody to help him if it's a battle of strength. But it's not a battle of strength, it's something more. It's a battle that involves defending God's character and God's government. And so God needs somebody to stand up for him. And in this sense, Satan is able to oppose God. He cannot oppose God when it comes to strength, but he can oppose God when it comes to a question of character and government. And so God has a champion, and this champion, of course, as we all know, is the Son of God, Jesus Christ. So the contestants are Satan versus Christ. But Christ's battle is for the Father. Christ is fighting for the Father. But he's the one who is God's champion. So he's the one that we always see in the forefront. What is the issue? The issue is Satan's government versus God's government. Two contending governments. Satan's government is going to be expressed through the beast kingdom. God's government is going to be expressed through the Church of Christ. What are the principles that we are looking at? In Satan's cause, the principle is self-government. In God's cause, the principle is God government. Now, of course, we're not going to go into the details of this, but you all remember the Garden of Eden, where Satan said to Eve, if you will disobey God, if you will take of the fruit, and if you will govern yourself, he didn't say the words, but it is evident when you look at the story. This is what he's saying. Many people think Satan was saying, I want you to begin to obey me instead of obeying God. And on the surface, that seems to be where he was going. But when you begin to understand the conflict better, you understand what he was trying to say was, if you govern yourself, instead of depending on God to govern you, you will become like God yourself. You'll become like gods, knowing good and evil. Right there in the beginning in the Garden of Eden, in that simple encounter, we have the elements that are involved in this great conflict. The question is, are we capable of governing ourselves? Does freedom mean that I govern myself, or is it greater and better and safer for us to completely submit to God? Because we are Christians, we have the answer. We have one answer that we are going to give everybody else. But remember, there are many people who are not Christians and they don't see things that way. This is why people are in rebellion against God all over the planet. Okay? They are in rebellion against God, against their sexuality. They are in their rebellion against God over church, the way the church is governed, about the role of different sexes. There's rebellion against God everywhere. People want to govern themselves because it's the nature of what Satan introduced to the planet. And as we all know, if Satan were to die tomorrow, and every angel of Satan were to die tomorrow, sin would continue. Because it is not Satan so much that is the problem. The problem is the principle of Satan's government. Once you have accepted that principle of government, that self-government is the way of true freedom, because that is what people are after, self-government. They think that is what makes them free. And I'll just come in to say, you are never really free until you come to the place where you recognize you don't know how to run your life. You don't know how to go out or come in. You don't know good from bad. You need somebody smarter than you to run your life. When you come to that place, you've come to the place where you are beginning, you're on the threshold of becoming free. Because true freedom means to release myself into the care of somebody who has perfect understanding, and find that my freedom is to choose him. And when I choose him, I'm okay. Then I find true freedom. The true freedom to be what I was always intended to be. So, the principles are self-government versus God's government. And the Satan's, you can see the two courses. Satan is in the middle lane. God is over on the right. So what are the methods that are used? This is important too. This is something that I find a lot of people don't understand. What method does Satan use to promote his government? It is moral education. And some people will be startled to hear this. Moral education? To know right from wrong? Yes, knowing right from wrong is not the way we overcome sin. It's not the way we become better people. Satan pushed that on Adam and Eve when he said, if you will become as gods, knowing good from evil. You'll have an awareness of morality, is what Satan was saying, and that will make you become gods in your own right. And there are people today who hold to the same fallacy. Moral education is not the way to be good. It's not the way to find your place in life. The true place, the true method of government is to have God living within. This is a method that the world cannot access. And many Christians do not understand. Many emphasize moral education, but the true way of God, the true method of God's government is to have God living on the inside. The proving ground, or the place chosen for this battle to play out, is on planet Earth. Satan's kingdom here is where Satan is going to show how his system works. And Christ's kingdom here is the way God is going to show how his kingdom works. So everything has become centered on this planet. Notice I emphasize the kingdom here, because God's kingdom encompasses the entire universe. Although Satan doesn't have any place outside of this planet, but God's kingdom encompasses the entire universe. But the proving ground, or the place where these issues are going to be worked out, is planet Earth. It is here on this planet. The weapons that are being used, as I said, they're not weapons of force, not swords, not laser weapons, not guns, not atomic elements. No. It's misinformation on Satan's side. We might refer to that as lies, and force or compulsion. On God's side, it is truth and lifestyle. Our weapons, the elements that we will use to defend our kingdom, is the truth. As Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And the other thing is a lifestyle. We might refer to that as witness. It's a demonstration of how the kingdom works. These are the elements that will win the battle or lose the battle. So, Satan, on Satan's side, he is defending his government, which is self-government. You govern yourself, and how do you know good from evil? It is based on understanding moral education. It's based on knowing what is right and what is wrong, and if you know right and wrong, you can live a good life. It's a fallacy. But that's how Satan is trying to carry out his government. And that is being demonstrated in this world here. And Satan is using lies to promote his philosophy, and where it fails, he will resort to force. In the cause of God, God's champion Jesus Christ has established God's government. The kingdom of heaven is here, has been established since the day of Pentecost. And in this kingdom, God's government rules. And what is God's government? It is God living inside, or Christ in you, the hope of glory. And this is to be manifested in the kingdom of God here on this planet. And it's going to be demonstrated in the truth that we teach, the truth that we live, and the lifestyle that we demonstrate here in this world. So these are the issues, and these are the elements that are involved. Now, these two kingdoms are to be judged. If you have two kingdoms side by side, and these two kingdoms are promoting different principles, there has to be a way and there has to be a time for the issue to be settled. They need to be judged or examined, if I put it another way. Means the same thing. So, hopefully up to this point, everybody is following. These two kingdoms, the kingdom of Christ and the kingdom of Satan, they are here on this earth face to face. And at the conclusion of a certain time, we believe it's going to be at the end of 6,000 years. After both these kingdoms have been growing for 2,000 years, there is to be a final confrontation of these kingdoms, when there is to be a judgment to determine which of these kingdoms really is fit to continue forever. Now, this last great conflict between the two kingdoms and the judgment of these kingdoms is what the book of Revelation is about. So, hopefully, Everybody has understood me up to this point, and now you know what Revelation is about. And it's important because many people think Revelation is a book about predictions of the future. God just thought, okay, I'm going to tell you what will happen to America. I want to tell you what will happen to Europe. I want to tell you there is a reason behind all of this. There's a greater purpose. Revelation is the story of how these two kingdoms are going to be judged and of the events that will be involved in this judgment. So, as you begin Revelation chapter 4, that is what we see. We see the judgment scene. If you go to Revelation 4, where we are not going this morning, but you will see that God is sitting on a throne. You'll see the four living creatures are there. You'll see the 7 lamps of fire representing the Holy Spirit. You will see 24 elders sitting on thrones. You'll see millions of angels standing around the throne. Lightnings and thunderings are coming out of the throne. And you will see Jesus represented as a lamb standing there, and he is opening a book with 7 seals. Now, this book of the 7 seals is the same book that was opened in Daniel 7 when it says the judgment was set and the books were opened. So this is the judgment. What is the judgment? It's the judgment of the two kingdoms. Heaven has finally gathered down at the end of time. In our day, there's a great gathering in heaven, and the Apostle John in vision was taken into heaven, and God gave him a view of this judgment. God showed him what was taking place. Now, in this judgment, we are going to look at an examination of the two kingdoms. That is what the book of Revelation is about. All right, so the first 3 chapters of Revelation, as I said, we're not looking at that this morning. It's kind of like an introduction. I'm going to just call it an introduction. There's a lot of material there, but the judgment does not begin in chapter 1, 2, or 3, so I'm not going there. What we have is an introduction. We have letters to the 7 churches. Another time we can look at that in detail. But what we are interested in is the judgment, and the judgment actually begins in chapter 4. From chapter 4 to chapter 11, we have the judgment of the kingdom of Christ. Chapter 4 to 11. You can make a note of those chapters. We have the judgment of the kingdom of Christ. Then from chapter 12 to chapter 19, we have the judgment of the kingdom of the beast, or Satan's kingdom. So this is where the meat of Revelation is. I have numbered it 2 and 3. That is where the heart of Revelation is, and that is what concerns us. That is the era in which we live, and we believe that this is the age in which we live, and that before we die, we are going to see this come to a conclusion. That is my belief, all right? And I have reasons for it that I don't have the time to go into this morning, but I believe we are in section 2 and 3, and that if I don't, I'm not going to die of old age. I think Jesus will come and there will be a conclusion before I get to that place. I'm not a prophet. I'm not saying it is absolutely so. I'm saying I think it is so. All right? Now the last 3 chapters of Revelation, 20, 21, and 22, I'm looking at as a kind of postscript. By the time you get to Revelation 20, it is over. Satan has been put in the bottomless pit. The kingdom of the beast has been destroyed. So Revelation 20 to 22 is telling you about heaven and what takes place afterwards. That time, nobody else is going to be saved. It's done. By the time you get to the 3rd section, it is over and done. So we're not going to look at section 4 or section 1. It's 2 and 3. That is our place, and that's what we're focusing on, the judgment. So this is the overall picture of Revelation. Once you get this picture, you begin to find it easier to understand the different elements you can fit into these 4 sections. So what I'm going to do next is just look at these two parts of Revelation, the judgment of Christ's kingdom, and we see it takes in chapters 4 to 11. I'm just going to look at a sequence of events and look at how it is brought up in Revelation. Now, we're looking at the kingdom of Christ. Revelation 4 to 11 highlights the judgment of the kingdom of Christ. Now, what are the events that take place in this judgment of Christ's kingdom? Here are the events in sequence as I understand them. Now, I'm just going to put several lists on the screen. And these lists are looking at the events in sequence as most of us understand them. Definitely as I understand them, the sequence. If something is out of sequence, you can raise your hand and explain, and I will try to clarify. But here are the events in sequence. This is where I believe we are today. We are in this period of time. The first thing that happens in this time of the end is that the judgment commences. The beginning of the judgment is the beginning of the end of time, or the time of the end. The judgment begins. That's where it starts. That's where our interest is involved. Revelation 4, the judgment is set, the books are opened, Jesus begins to open the book of the seven seals, which contains the story of the kingdom. So the judgment begins. At this time, the prophecies of Daniel are understood, because the key to understanding the judgment is in the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 7. The judgment was set and the books were opened. So at the time when the judgment begins, that's the time when the book of Daniel is understood. And that's where we are today. The third thing that happens is what we call the judgment of the living. So, you have the judgment commencing, first of all, and then the judgment moves on to the living. Now, why do we say the judgment of the living? Because it involves the present kingdom. Everybody in this room, let me see. According to my list, it seems we have about 83 participants. I know some people are on more than one device, but more or less, we have about 80 people, maybe. We are living. And our kingdom in our time, the church in our day, is going to be judged. Now, why do I make a distinction between the judgment and the judgment of the living? The reason is because, somebody unmuted? The reason is because, somebody unmuted, please mute. The reason is because living people are judged in a different way than, or the living kingdom is judged in a different way than the kingdom which is in the past. And let me explain. If you want to know what kind of person my father is, my father died in 2010. You can't go and study my father, what he's doing, because my father is dead. The only way you can know what kind of person my father was, you have to go to records. You have to go to people who knew him and you ask them what kind of person he was. You go back and you read his writings. You go back and you read what history says about him. When it comes to somebody who is dead, you open books. You open records. But I am alive. You are alive. How does anybody know what we are? If you go back and look at the record of my life, you might see a bad person. But what am I today? My life is not over. So when you come to judging a living person or the living kingdom, what is the state of Christ's kingdom? You have to look at the present people who are alive and who make up the kingdom and see what kind of people are they now. What they were in the past is not the important thing. To decide what they are today, you look at their lives today. So this is why we have to make a distinction between the kingdom of the past and the kingdom of the living. That's why I say the judgment of the living. And you're going to see why this is different. So that's the third thing that we are looking at. We are coming to the place where there is to be the judgment of those who are alive. And I'll explain why this is so important in a moment. Now, about the time that the judgment of the living begins, then something that we call the latter rain will fall. And this latter rain is the final great outpouring of the Spirit of God, when great power is given to the church or to the kingdom. The next thing that happens, it is at this time that the gospel is preached everywhere. So you find that in all corners of the earth, people like you and me go to every corner of this world. People in India, people in the USA, people in Jamaica, people in Australia, people in Europe, Serbia, Montenegro, wherever. Africa, wherever you may be. People rise up with a great power accompanying their work. Miracles are taking place, just like at Pentecost. And there is the preaching of the gospel taking place everywhere. And the power of the latter rain gives great effect to the message that we carry. The next thing that happened is that the kingdom is perfected. Now, this word perfect is a hard word, because nobody can tell you exactly what it means to be perfect. But I know that it means that the kingdom becomes mature. It becomes something that is fit to represent Christ. Then you have what is called the close of probation, which means that God's mercy, no, God's grace. I don't even like to put it that way. But yes, God's grace comes to an end. There's no more opportunity for salvation. Everybody has made his decision. And there's no more, God's Spirit is no longer working among men. The next thing that happens is that because of this, false religion is abandoned. And I'm making this point because God is always working with people who are in darkness, in the churches, in Catholicism, in Protestantism, in Adventism, in Jehovah's Witnesses, in every religion. The Spirit of God is working. But when the kingdom is perfected, God's true church appears in its beauty. Grace comes to an end, then false religion is abandoned. God turns away from those false religious systems. At that time they bear the name of Christian, but there's nothing of Christianity in them. And point number 9, Jesus at that point takes charge of the kingdoms of this earth. I have to hurry a little bit. Now, in Revelation, this is where we get all this information from. I want you to look at the list on the left and tell me, no, don't tell me, but I want you to look at it, and I am assuming you agree with the sequence. This is how things happen. Now, this is what Revelation is telling you. For those who say that Revelation is difficult to understand, that's the exact picture we get in Revelation. All right, so in Revelation chapter 4, Jesus begins opening the seals. And at the same time, if you go to Revelation chapter 6, seal number 5 is opened. People who are dead are given white robes. And the only way you can be given a white robe when you are dead is because the record of your life proves that you really were a good person. You really were a Christian. How can a dead person be given a robe of righteousness? Because when you are dead, you are dead. But your record is still speaking. And so in this judgment, an examination of the seals or of the books proves that these dead saints were true Christians. They are given these white robes. The second thing, Daniel's prophecies are understood. It is explained in Revelation 11, where it says the little book is open. What about the judgment of the living? We see that happening in Revelation 11 and verse 1 when it says, John was to rise up and take a reed like a rod and measure the temple. The temple represents the people of God, the place, the people who worship in the temple. They are to be measured. This represents the judgment of those who are alive. The latter rain falls. That is represented by God saying in Revelation 11, in verse 4, I will give power unto my 2 witnesses. This is the coming of the latter rain. The gospel preached everywhere. It says, and they will prophesy 1,250 days clothed in sackcloth. Revelation 11. The kingdom perfected. Where do we see that? We see in chapter 7, where it says that 144,000 are sealed from the tribes of Israel. Out of Christendom, A special group of people are sealed or set apart. They're the ones who truly belong to God at this time of the end. So after this, you have the close of probation, and that is represented in chapter 8 or chapter 11, first of all, by the witnesses being killed. The 2 witnesses are killed. That means that the word of God has no more place in the world. God represents it as the 2 witnesses being killed. It's the same thing as the censer, chapter 8. The angel throws down the censer. It means that there's no more work of intercession taking place. False religion is abandoned. This is represented by the 7 trumpets. The 7 trumpets fall upon apostate religion. What you see in chapter 8 to chapter 9 of Revelation is an expression of the terrible situation that breaks out in the religious world when the Spirit of God abandons false Christianity, false religion. And then, of course, in Revelation 11, the mystery is finished. Jesus takes control of the kingdoms of this earth. Now, look at the list on the right, and you will see that there's a problem. There's a problem with the list on the right, and this is where understanding Revelation is a little difficult. Even though you know what is taking place. Just look at the list on the left and you'll know what is taking place. If you look at the list on the left, it's not hard to understand. But the problem with the list on the right, let me show you. All of this, all right, this is chapter 1. This is chapter 6. No, not chapter 1, chapter 4. Beg your pardon. This is chapter 4. This is chapter 6. All of this is chapter 11. This is chapter 7. This is chapter 11. This is chapter 8. This is chapter 11. So, if you look at this, it looks like a big mix-up of confusion. You might even think that I am conveniently putting these things there because in the book of Revelation, you do not see that sequence. Start with chapter 4, and all of this is in chapter 11. Then you go back to chapter 7. Over on the left, I have everything in a nice sequence. But in Revelation, that sequence is not there. Now, this is where studying the book of Revelation is important, because those of you who have been keeping in touch with our Revelation studies, you understand how we come to this sequence. That's the part that is difficult to understand. How do we get this sequence from Revelation 4 to 11? It is there, but I will admit that it's more challenging to put it together. There are very good reasons why we get the sequence on the left. Very good reasons. But it involves, when you go to Revelation itself, you have to understand, why do we put chapter 11 way up near the top when it is actually way down at the bottom when you read Revelation? And that is something we're not going to touch on today. I'm going to ask you to just hold that and to trust that as we go through the book of Revelation again, we're going to go through it again pretty soon. Then at least now you will have a basis, a foundation to understand what we are looking at. I would recommend that you keep a list. You keep the list, this list. Keep this list. And if you keep it somewhere where you can access it easily, then the next time we're going through the book of Revelation, it will help so we can understand better how we get this sequence. All right? As I said, today we are doing a kind of overview. So this is the first part. This is the judgment of the kingdom of Christ. And this is the sequence. Now we're going to go to part 2, which is the judgment of the kingdom of Satan. And we are going to also look at the sequence of events. All right? So we are looking at the kingdom of Satan, and God is revealing to us the events that happen from the perspective of Satan's kingdom. Now, it doesn't start directly with Satan's kingdom. First of all, we get a view of the people or the elements that are involved. The first thing we see is that God's agency is highlighted. And by this I mean the woman in Revelation 12. And then the enemy appears, the dragon ready to devour the woman. That's where it starts. Because God is giving us the background of what is going on with Satan and the conflict between Satan. He's showing us the elements involved. And then God's champion appears, which is a man-child. Now what happens after that? From this point now, Christ's kingdom is established. So now we have two kingdoms on the earth. And that's where the war begins. Because immediately when Christ's kingdom is established, the kingdom comes under attack. And the last church, it comes down to the point where the last church is severely persecuted. Then we see that Satan has a special agent, and this agent is revealed. And then you find that apostates unite with this agent, and then the remnant, or the last part of the church, is targeted by Satan's agent plus these apostates. And then what happens now is that the United States comes into the picture. Or the agent, the dragon's agent, the beast, he gets a friend to come along and help him. And then this friend persecutes the remnant. Now you can look at that list, and somebody says the volume is low. I don't know. I've turned it up as high as I can. If I go any higher, it's going to become distorted. Maybe something is wrong with my audio system. I don't know. I hope that it's probably on that brother's side. Turn up your volume, Brother Simon. I don't know what else to tell you. Other people are saying it's fine, so it's probably on your side. All right, so it's you, Brother Simon. So these are the events in sequence. Where in Revelation do we see what is the equivalent event in Revelation? In Revelation, God's agency highlighted. It's represented as a woman seen in heaven. The enemy appears, a dragon is seen in heaven. God's champion appears, the woman's seed is born, and he's caught up to heaven. When he's caught up to heaven, the dragon is kicked out of heaven, he's thrown down to the earth. That's the establishing of the kingdom of Christ. Those two things happen at the same time. The kingdom comes under attack because the dragon persecutes the woman. The woman is God's agency up to this point, and so the dragon persecutes the woman. Then it says in verse 17 of Revelation 12 that the dragon goes to make war against the remnant of the woman's seed. So it's no longer highlighting the woman. It's highlighting the seed of the woman who was caught up to heaven. But it says there's a remnant of the seed. There's a part of Jesus Christ remaining on earth. And the dragon goes to make war against that remnant. Now, at that point, Satan's agent is revealed. Now, up to this point, we have seen Satan making war. He's seen in heaven. He goes to persecute the woman. He throws water out of his mouth. He goes to make war against the remnant. Now, God shows us who he's working through, because we have seen that God is working through the seed of the woman. Now, it shows you Satan is working through something called a beast. So he goes to make war against the remnant of Christ. And the Bible shows you that he's going to use a beast that rises up out of the sea. Satan has an agent as well. God is working through his kingdom, the church. Satan is working through his kingdom, the beast. Something we don't see in chapter 13, but when you go to chapter 17, you see that there's something that is working with the beast. You see that there's a woman riding the beast. We don't see this in Revelation 13, but we see it in chapter 17. And that's another place where we can see that the sequence in Revelation is not always according to the chapters. But we put things together and we come up with the sequence on the left. What we see on the left is the sequence as it happens. But over on the right, we are fitting things together. So we see that the sea beast comes up, the beast comes out of the sea. And at that time, Babylon is riding the beast. This woman, Babylon, is riding the beast. And it is through the beast that the dragon makes war. It says the dragon makes war against the remnant. It is through the beast, because it says the beast, it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And then you find that another beast comes to his help, a beast with two horns, which we believe to be the United States. And this two-horned beast, or the United States, institutes something called the mark of the beast, which will bring the greatest persecution against the remnant of God's people, the remnant of the seed. Somebody's unmuted. Please mute. All right, so this, for the most part, I think somebody is not checking. I have to go ahead and mute everybody. Simon, Brother Simon, you're unmuted. Brother Simon, where do I mute everybody again? I can't find the mute all button at the moment. All right, anyway, that's done. Thank you, Brother Simon. All right, so this basically is what we see in chapters 12 and 13 of Revelation. And I'm going to say that this is like part A of the judgment of the beast. And we go on to part B, continuing Satan's kingdom judged. This is taking us from chapter 14. So, now we see the events continuing from there. Last thing we saw was that the mark of the beast is set up. The USA joins with the first beast. Let me call it the Eurasian beast from Europe and Asia. The USA joins with that beast in persecuting God's people. This is a time now when the gospel is preached everywhere. And if you will remember from when we were looking at the kingdom of Christ, it said that at that time the two witnesses are given power. The gospel is preached everywhere. God's kingdom is perfected at this time. Notice the same thing is happening that we saw earlier on, but it's happening from part B of Revelation, the second section. We're looking at it. Then probation comes to a close, or grace comes to an end. And at this time, the godless king appears. Now, who is this and what are we talking about? I'll explain more in just a moment. A special power appears. And then there is a union of Antichrist forces, one last uniting of the forces of the Antichrist. And then there's a close of probation. Then God's Spirit abandons the earth. Now all of this happens at the same time. I kind of have them in sequence, but they are kind of overlapping. When probation closes, then the godless king appears, or the beast comes out of the bottomless pit. And that is the time when the Spirit of God abandons the earth. And now, at this point, religion is universally rejected. I mean, false religion is rejected, as well as God's religion has already been rejected. So all religion is rejected at this point, in my understanding. And I'll explain why. Now the saints are severely persecuted, greater persecution than they have ever experienced. And then Christ returns for his people at that point. The forces of an Antichrist are destroyed, and all sinners are destroyed. Now, let's see where we find this in the book of Revelation. And so the earth is empty of all humans, of course, at that point. Where do we find this in the book of Revelation? In Revelation, in this part B, that's when we see the three angels flying in Revelation chapter 14. God's kingdom is perfected. We see the 144,000 standing on Mount Zion. They are without fault before the throne of God. That's Revelation 14, the same thing. Probation closes. That's Revelation 14, when it says Christ sits on a cloud with a sickle and he reaps the harvest of the earth. This is when God's people are sealed, permanently sealed, that they can no longer go back, or they will no longer go back into sin. And the people who have the mark of the beast have made their decision forever. This is the close of probation. The godless king appears. In Revelation 17, it talks about the beast coming out of the pit. He was and is not, but he will ascend from the bottomless pit. When he ascends, he becomes king number 8. There are 7 kings One is still to appear. This is king number 8. And I believe this king is going to be completely godless. And I'll explain why I think he's going to be completely godless. This king or this kingdom going to be completely godless. At this point, the 10 horns receive power along with this beast. And the Spirit of God has left the earth, so the 7 plagues begin to fall. Religion is universally rejected. How do we know? Because these 10 horns who have joined with the beast, these 10 horns will destroy Babylon. So Babylon is destroyed, and Babylon is false religion. Babylon has been riding the beast, but at this point, the 10 horns turn against the woman, eat her flesh, make her naked, and burn her with fire. So, you see that false religion or false Christianity, whichever it is universally rejected, and you know that true religion, God's people, are already hated and being persecuted. So, false religion is hated, true religion is hated. That's why I call this power a godless king. Whatever it is, it attacks all religion. That's why I'm tempted to believe that this king number 8 is going to be some kind of atheistic power. So we will see. The saints are severely persecuted because it says the 10 horns will make war against Christ. They don't actually fight against Christ in person. They fight against Christ through his people. At this time, Christ returns for his people because we see the armies of heaven appear riding on horses. Jesus appears, and on his thigh is a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The forces of Antichrist are destroyed. It says in Revelation 19 that the beast and the false prophet are cast into the lake of fire. And it says the remnant are slain with the sword that comes from the mouth of Christ. So everybody is dead. All who are not saved are slain by the brightness of the coming of Christ. And the earth is empty of all humans because Satan is bound for 1,000 years. God's people live and reign with him during those 1,000 years. All right, now I admit that I have been very hasty. I've been running through because I'm very conscious of the time, and this would have been a study better suited for the afternoon. But I know that this afternoon I'm going to have that discussion with Brother Joel, and so I had to do it this morning. So I have had to rush through. What I'm hoping is that you will take note of the list that I have there, because if you look at it and you go back and look at it afterwards, you will see that the sequence that we have on the left is just what I think most of us believe and have always believed. The only problem we have is how to get it to harmonize with the book of Revelation. But you can see that these elements are there in Revelation. The only question we might have is, how do you get Revelation into this sequence? How do we put Revelation in this sequence? Because when we read Revelation, we don't actually see that sequence. And I promise you that we can come to that sequence in a very logical and reasonable way. It is there once you begin to pick up the clues in the book of Revelation. But that is a study for another time. And I have to go at this time because I have to run off. I'm going to take the time to just make, for 2 minutes, if somebody has a quick question, let me pray.
I need to know the title. Please give me the title right quick.
It's Revelation Simplified.
Got it.
All right, let me quickly pray, and then if there's a question, I'll take it, and then I'll run off. Let's pray.